Hey, welcome back to the channel. I get this question all the time. Do I need to be in a calorie surplus to gain muscle? And I get why people ask that because everywhere online you see people saying you've got to quote unquote bulk if you want to grow muscle. But like most things in fitness, it's not that black and white. It really depends on a few key things. How long you've been training, how much body fat you're carrying, and just how consistent you are with your training and recovery overall. So in this video, I want to give my personal opinion on the topic and just break it down in a simple, real world way, know, overly scientific jargon, if you will, just a realistic look at how calories actually play into muscle gain and when you might need to eat more versus when you really don't. And stick around till the end because I'm going to make a point that I think is really important to hear. So, the idea that you have to be in a surplus comes mostly from bodybuilding culture. Bodybuilders are trying to maximize every little ounce of potential muscle that they possibly can. And for them, that large surplus of food makes sense. But most of us aren't bodybuilders. Most people watching this just want to look better with their shirt off, feel stronger, move better, and put on a bit of muscle without feeling like they're constantly force feeding themselves or just getting out of shape. That's where this nuance comes in because whether or not you need to eat in a surplus depends entirely on you, your training age, your body fat, and how your body responds. So let's start with training experience because that's a big one. If you're a beginner, meaning you've just started lifting or you're coming back after some time off, your body is extremely responsive in that state. You're giving it a new stimulus and it's going to adapt quickly, even without eating more than maintenance. You can literally gain muscle while maintaining your current weight or even while eating slightly less. That's what people will call recomposition. Now, if you've been training for years, your form is solid, your strength is decent, and you've already built a really good base, then yeah, a small surplus can definitely help you squeeze out those extra gains if that's what you're after. In that circumstance, your body's more resistant to change, so the extra calories give it a little bit more fuel to recover and build. But again, that's small. We're not talking about like a big, huge, 1,000 calorie bulk. Even a 200, 300 calorie bump per day can be enough. Your starting body fat level changes the game too, and in my opinion, might be the biggest factor. If you're already really lean, like around 10% body fat or less, your body doesn't have much stored energy to pull from. So if you try to eat at maintenance or below, it's probably going to be tough to build muscle. That's when being in a calorie surplus makes sense. It gives your body the resources it needs to train hard, recover, and actually grow. But if you're carrying more body fat, maybe like 20% or more as a male, you've already got stored energy available. You can stay at maintenance or even a small deficit and still build muscle, especially if you're new to resistance training. That's why people who start lifting while overweight often lose fat and build muscle at the same time. But none of this matters if your training isn't there. Calories don't just cause muscles to grow, training does. If you're not pushing yourself, if you're not progressively challenging muscles over time, no amount of eating is going to help you build muscle. You could be in a 500 calorie surplus, but if you're just going through the motions and not pushing yourself hard, you're not really going to grow. On the other hand, if your training is consistent, your effort is high, your form is really solid, and you're recovering properly, you can absolutely make gains while eating around maintenance. So before you ever worry about calories, make sure your training is actually giving your body a reason to adapt. Now, there are definitely times when increasing calories helps. If you've been training hard for a while and you feel like you've plateaued, adding a bit more food can give you that extra energy to push harder in your sessions for sure. You'll likely perform a little better and recover a little faster. That said, I think a lot of people jump to the idea of I need to bulk way too soon. They start pounding food, gain unnecessary fat, and then spend months dieting it off later, and most of the time they lose half the muscle they just gained during that cut. So rather than bouncing between bulking and cutting all the time, I think it's smarter to just kind of hover around that maintenance amount of calories when you're trying to put on muscle. If your strength's improving, your physique's looking tighter, and your weight is pretty stable, that's perfect. Then, if you hit a real plateau after a few months, go ahead and bump your calories slightly and see how your body responds. Now, I also want to talk about something that I think is just as important: not getting lost in the weeds with all this stuff. This is that point I was talking about earlier that I do think is really, really important, because at the end of the day, you don't need to track every single calorie or every macro for the rest of your life to make progress. I used to do that. I used to track every gram of food, every bite, every macro, and I'll be honest, it started feeling way too obsessive. Now, I'm not saying tracking is bad. For someone who's brand new, it can actually be super helpful to track for a little while, just to understand what's in your food and how much you're really eating. That awareness can go a long way. But once you've done that for a bit and you have a general sense of portion sizes and what your meals look like, you don't need to keep doing it forever. When I finally stopped tracking, I felt so much better. I felt lighter mentally. I had more energy for other things in life. I wasn't constantly thinking about food numbers or whether I hit my macros that day. And you realize it's just not that serious. You don't need to optimize every little detail to see great results if you're not a serious bodybuilder or athlete. If you want to gain some muscle and you look in the mirror and you're super lean, yeah, maybe start eating a bit more. Just watch the scale go up slowly every couple of weeks. But if you look in the mirror and you already have a good deal of body fat on you, you probably don't need to be eating even more. You definitely don't need to eat when you're not hungry, that's for sure. Just eat normal meals, mostly whole foods, train hard, sleep well, and recover. That's the stuff that really drives results. People overcomplicate it way too much. You can absolutely gain plenty of muscle without being neurotic, without tracking everything down to the gram, and without turning eating into a math problem. So, yeah, do you need a calorie surplus to build muscle? Sometimes, but not always. It depends on your experience with training and your current body fat levels. If you're consistent, training hard, and eating like a normal human being with mostly real food, you're going to build muscle over time. So, my opinion is to just not overthink it. Don't obsess over the numbers. Stay patient, stay consistent, train hard, recover, and the results will come. All right, so that's it for today's video. I'm going to go ahead and let the rest of my workout play here on screen, even though I won't be doing any voiceover on it. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them below, and I will do my best to help if I can. All right, I'll see you in the next one.